Hi everyone and welcome back to the channel. If you enjoy our content, please support us by clicking the subscribe button just below in the bottom right hand corner of the screen. Now, today I'm so excited because I've been waiting for this podcast for so long and this particular guest, because when I first saw them on Gaia TV, I was blown away on what they do. So let's get on with this interview. We have the amazing Nicola Farmer, who is a universal spiritual consultant. But Nicola is also the founder of the ICU Academy. And the Academy was set up to assist children to become the best version of themselves, align them with their future, and offer them a start in life many generations before them didn't have the opportunity to experience. I came across this, like I said, on Gaia TV, and it blew me away. Nicola Farmer, welcome to Spiritual Talk. Can you just quickly tell us what I'm talking about, why I'm so excited, and what you do at the Academy?
Yeah, thanks, Paul, and thank you for having me on your podcast.
Oh, brilliant.
So the ICU Academy was birthed several years ago now, and it's a method that we work with children, and these children go through quite amazing transformations with the program, which is 10 to 12 weeks long. But basically, the potential of the work is that the children can see with a blindfold. So they don't need the use of their eyes. They use their outer consciousness, which in spiritual terms, they basically see with their spirit eyes. So they don't need their physical eyes to be able to see. And using this method with the children, it's not just about seeing. This is about them going through a life-changing experience that can help them with their confidence, their self-esteem, education, life, social life, all sorts of things, which we've seen some remarkable results with.
Now, if you don't mind, we will share a link in the podcast so people can see the clip on Gaia, if we can get hold of that one. I know there's others on YouTube as well. So just to reiterate, you blindfold children to help them become aware of. So is it a clairvoyant vision they're having?
No, it's not, because you see, we know that the third eye is the pineal gland. And when you block all light going through the physical eyes, it temporarily shuts down the pineal gland, which is the third eye. So they don't see clairvoyantly. They actually see as if they were looking through the eyes of their spirit. And until the child becomes really adept with that ability to see with the blindfold, it's like the spirit is over their shoulder and they see from a different angle. So we actually have to teach the children a new hand-eye coordination, because it's not coming from the normal place. And we also know that this is there's a scientific and sort of a medical connection to it as well, because when they start to see blindfolded, they get very itchy eyes. And I was told by an ophthalmologist that, in his opinion, the eyes are being what's the word? There's like a tiny electrical charge coming from the brain to stimulate the physical eyes, because the brain can't understand how the child is reading, but the eyes aren't working.
Yeah.
So that the outcome of that is their eyes begin to itch quite a lot and they get watery. It does stop, but it's a really good sign that the level of consciousness is changing to see with their spirit.
Your academy, sorry, you're also on Facebook, because I'd really like people to see this. I'd really like to promote this, because it is an amazing thing. Because this is a relatively new academy. How long have you been going now?
Well, several years now. Paul, I've got the worst memory, and if you asked me dates, I couldn't tell you. But let's just stick with several years, because that's about as much as I can remember.
Yeah. In terms of children, when will humanity start to see the benefit of this way of learning and teaching children?
Well, I don't know if it'll be seen on a large scale right now, because what I'm constantly being told is that it's not the quantity of children that we teach, it's the quality that we teach. And we know that through guidance, that working with these children puts them in the potentially in the top 20% of achievers in the world.
Wow.
Now, we're working with ages between 6 and 12, so we've got to wait for them to become adults to actually see the changes that it can make on a national scale and potentially a global scale, because I've been training teachers all around the world. But what I do know is that what we're seeing with the children is leaps in education, leaps in confidence. One of the children I taught, he's now becoming sort of an international swimmer. So whether he was able to do that before the ICU program or not, we won't know. But what we're seeing is these children are achieving the best that they can in their lives.
Yeah.
And whatever they go on to do as adults, then that will continue as well.
Yeah. And I remember the clip on Gaia when you said you teach the children in quite, not short bursts, but it's quite difficult the way you teach them in terms of how exhausting it is. I mean, but I also have noticed you have teachers all around the world, and this is something that's starting to grow. I was really amazed of how many teachers in different destinations around the world, and that can only be a great thing.
Absolutely, because people say to me, why don't you have more teachers? And it's like, well, actually, again, like I say, it's the quality, not the quantity. But we know that one child can make a difference to the whole family, that can make a difference to a community, and so on and so on. We had a family in Mallorca, and the parents were, well, they were divorcing. It was a very toxic relationship. The two little girls were suffering because of, the family environment. And one of the daughters did the program. And by the end of the 12 sessions, the parents had fallen in love again.
Oh.
And it wasn't anything she did. It was literally the radiation of love that comes from them. And so many parents report how their children become so much more loving.
I'm just trying to process that. So her energy was then connecting to the family unit, which was then changing her vibration. That's just okay. That's quite amazing itself, and a beautiful thing, But we in modern times we have so much conflict and pressure on the family unit. Both mum and dad have to work to pay the bills, etc., etc. And the idea that a child can change that family dynamic is pretty amazing.
It is, and for me, spirituality, the whole basic foundation of spirituality is love and respect. And when we are able to align these children with that part of themselves that can stay with them for forever, then it's got to be a win-win.
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of the parents that bring their children along to these programs and they see that you start to blindfold the children, how do they, is that an instant process, or is that something that takes a period of time?
No, when they come for the first session, the first thing we do is tell them they're going to wear a blindfold, and we tell them to keep their eyes closed underneath the blindfold for the whole session. And that's the first thing they learn. And they stay blindfolded for the whole session. When they practice at home, they wear the blindfold. So it's not anything that I can say, is odd, because it's just natural for me and for the children. And one of the key things about this is that we never ask the child a question, because we know that the left brain, the logical side of the brain, has to find the answer. And what we're predominantly doing with the children is keeping them right-brained through the whole session, so that hopefully by the end of the program, they've got left-right brain coherence, and therefore the left and the right aren't opposing each other, they're working together. So the blindfold is right from the start.
Can I ask a personal question? Am I too old
Of
to
course.
learn it? Could this be something an adult could pick up?
Just the fact that you've asked the question, the answer is yes.
Oh, okay.
Because the children never say, "Can I do it?"
Oh,
It's like this inbuilt part of them that they just know it's possible. And to be honest with you, Paul, not all the children see, but they go through a metamorphosis in the period of the program that is life-changing for them. But let me just explain to you why we don't teach adults. An adult's left brain is very, very developed, and we also know that the ego part of the brain, which is rather controlling of most human beings, that will prevent an adult from seeing. Okay, so with the children, like I said, we work with the right brain. And also we have to be very aware of the level of frequency, the vibrations that we're working in with the children. And when a teacher goes through the training, they go through intense training. I teach them how to retrain the ego, and so that the ego is working with them, not against them. I teach them how to work with their inner child from a whole different perspective. They go through a 4-part meditation where they become heart coherent. And it's quite an intense training program. But if I was to train an adult, there's nothing stopping that adult then going to teach a child, but they haven't gone through the training that the teachers go through. So there's a lot of reasons why. But if we just say it's because of the ego and the left brain, that would be the quick answer.
okay. So in terms of, I mean, I've been looking at a lot of consciousness ideas, people that work around consciousness, and
Yeah.
there's clearly, I'm just thinking from an adult perspective, maybe if we could work with the ego, and become more spiritually evolved is the right word, I guess. And,
Yeah.
that we still have potential, because I always believe that there's always, I don't know, maybe it's because I'm getting old, I don't know, but I always believe there's still time for me. On some
Yeah, and I do agree. I absolutely agree. And the work I developed around retraining the ego is proving really, really good results. But I think it's not about whether you can see or you can't see as an adult. It's about managing expectation. A lot of adults have huge expectations. They feel many obligations, but there's so much attachment to outcome that's where we would be challenged more than anything.
Yeah. Coming back to the children, sorry, Nicola, I've got so many questions around this. I call them special children. Children with certain diagnoses. Could this help too?
Yeah, we've worked with children on the spectrum. And we've worked with various children. But the kids on the spectrum, see, I'm not a fan of the word autism.
Yeah.
It's a label.
Yeah.
And if I'm going to call them anything, I call them authentic, because children on the spectrum can be nothing but authentic. They don't know how to be anything else.
Yeah.
So I call it authentism or authentic. So what we see is, well, maybe if I can just backtrack here a little bit. For me, autism or authentism is simply a child who comes onto this planet with a very, very high frequency. And what these children are being expected to do is fit into a society, into a world that, if we just call it the 3rd dimensional world, but these children are a 4th and 5th dimension. And so they have to lower their frequency too much to fit in with society as they're expected to fit in.
Yeah.
So So if I liken them to being a 120 watt light bulb, but society needs 30 watt light bulbs, you can see how much they have to dim their light to be able to function in the world as it is. So when we take children with autism through the program, what we're giving them is permission to be in an expanded field of light where they don't feel like they have to fit in, and they can be their authentic self. And the program works brilliantly with kids in that sort of genre, really.
I do have a lot of personal experience with autism, and it is such an unknown quantity in terms of how those children fit into society, because they don't, frankly, and there's not a lot of help.
No.
So again, this program is enlightening parents with children with autism. Have I said that right? I can't even say it myself.
Yeah, that's it.
Could we do online programs?
No, that it has to be one-to-one in person.
Okay.
I have tried to teach it online, but because you have to be sat beside the child to see what they're seeing, it really doesn't work online at all.
Okay.
But as the volume of teachers grow around the world, there'll be someone somewhere that will be close to whoever's needed. And like most spiritual people, Paul, we know it's divinely guided. We know that the children will turn up when they're meant to, and we know that they'll find the right teachers. So I just trust in everything playing out perfectly, really.
I went on to your, I think it was the online website, and there is a link there to show you where the teachers are based. So if you're based in the UK or the US, you can quickly find someone that's not too far away from your location. So, but it's just one of the questions I wanted to ask you. What inspired you to create the Academy? Was it divinely given? Was it inspired? How did it come about?
Okay, so I was on a training course in Mexico. Some of you may have heard of John Varlo Melchizedek. I was becoming one of his teachers. And there was a lady there from Mexico who was talking about super psychic children. And of course, my ears pricked up very fast.
Yeah.
Anyway, long story short, she came to England and she said, would I be interested in learning how to work with the children? And so I went to Canada, and I was learning how to work with children there. And I brought the work back to the UK. And I was the only person in the whole of Europe at that time just working with a very similar method. And I kept getting guidance from my consciousness team. And they were saying, we want you to train teachers. And I was like, yeah, I can do that. That's no problem. But what I couldn't get was the blessing from the people in Mexico. And it was very disheartening. And so I just carried on working with the children, but I've still got this voice from consciousness saying, we want you to train teachers. And I just said, look, go away, leave me alone. I won't do it without their blessing.
Yeah. So
you're just going to have to leave me doing what I'm doing. And there was a period of silence, and then the voice started again. So in the end, I just said to them, I'm not doing it. Leave me alone. And this voice said to me, but you haven't asked us how. I was like, okay, fundamental basic, how? And they said, get pen and paper. And they downloaded this method. So I channeled it, wrote it all down, put it into a format, started trying it with the children. It was absolutely magnificent. It was faster. It was more modern. There was a quicker response with the children. So then I put a teacher training program together, and the rest is history.
Brilliant. So if I'm listening to this, so guys, if you're listening, on behalf of the parents, what's the criteria for them to become a teacher? Do they need to be psychic? That's another question.
No.
Okay.
No. And I get asked questions all the time. Do I need to be spiritual? And it's like, no, you just got to want to help change the world.
Yeah.
So my secretary, Glynis, she's amazing. She's just fantastic at all this organising. And so they would email her, she would send them an application form, and it's quite an extensive application form. There's a lot of triggering questions in there, really. But when the applications come in and I look at them, they also have to send a photograph. And I read the application, I hear what they're saying, but I also intuit the photograph. And if I'm not sure, I'll take guidance from Spirit and say, look, I'm not sure about this one, guide me. And there's very few people that I do turn down. But if I turn someone down to become a teacher, there's a big red flag,
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's an application form, photograph, and then they can take the training as and when a space becomes available, because I think we're almost full for the rest of this year for the teacher training program.
And it's not just a judgment about, they're not a particularly nice person. It could just be they're not ready for it.
Yeah.
And it was interesting.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. On the interview that you did on, I think the series was called Superpower. It was either episode 2 or 3 on Gaia. And there was also, it was interesting, one of your lovely parents who become a teacher, she was talking about a story that her dad didn't believe the daughter could do this. And then he'd come up behind her when she was reading and her vision went.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
What happened there? And her vision went.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
What happened there?
Well, you see, when the children are working in this really high vibe, their energy becomes super, super sensitive. And because the father was skeptical, when he walked towards her, her vision closed down. So basically it was like, if I describe it as her energy field shrunk around her. And then when the teacher saw that the father had come close, she beckoned him to move away. And as he moved away, the child's vision came back. So one of the criteria of when the children come to do the work with us, that the parents are protective of them from being around skeptical people.
Yeah, that's really interesting, isn't it? But then, okay, this is a curveball. How do we protect the children? We can't protect them. How do they avoid that going through life? Is it something we can prepare them for?
Well, it's not. Okay, it's not about through life. This is about while they're doing the training.
Oh, okay.
And especially in the early days. So when a child is consciously seeing, which means being able to read a book, read sentences in a book, that's the vulnerable part. When they become established and they can practically do anything without their eyes, then the energy is more solidified, and then the skeptics doesn't matter anymore. So they don't have to avoid them for life. It's just the early stages of the program.
Yeah, that's amazing. Like I said, I'm just blown away, Nicola, from the moment I saw the program and what the children can do. And children are so innocent. These children that you work with is just amazing to see. And there's so many questions I'd still like to ask you. But again, is there a criteria for for children as well that would fit the program?
No, but there's no criteria. If a child wants to do it, they can come and do it. We do emphasize that not every child can see, but the changes that they go through can be really profound. The only thing that I don't have a green light to do yet, and that's with work with children who have lost their sight.
Ah, okay.
It would be somewhat difficult now to even work with children who were born without vision, because they wouldn't know colours and shapes and words and images and things. I do believe further down the line we may be able to tap into a past life to bring that information forward.
Yeah.
But at the moment, children who have lost their sight, that's on hold, and purely because we're trying to establish this amazing work into a world that would question it, ridicule it, pull it apart, question it. So once we can establish it more as a natural thing for children to be able to do, that's when I believe I'll get the green light for children that have lost their sight.
And I know there's different degrees of loss of sight. Off the top of my head, I can't think of
Yeah.
the actual criteria, but there's quite a few levels of when you lose your sight. Do you think you can help everyone
Yeah.
that's lost impaired sight or lost their sight?
I think there is potential to do that for sure. I did work with a lady who had lost her vision several years before, and she did see. She saw with the blindfold, but actually, it disturbed her quite a bit because she'd become so used to not seeing, and whether there was a mental emotional attachment to it, I don't know. But it did upset her and it disturbed her to a degree that she didn't want to continue.
Yeah.
So I know it can work with them, but it's just when, that's all.
Yeah. The other thing I was going to touch on, if you don't mind, is trauma with children. Can this help children that have suffered trauma?
Yeah. So part of the program, the sessions that they do, so they come for an hour session for 10 to 12 weeks. And during that session, there's 2 opportunities for the child to go through a self-healing process. And actually, we don't even need to know what the healing is or what it's working on. If they've got a trauma, we don't need to know what it is because it automatically self-heals during the program. So just to give you an example, there was a little boy who his confidence was so low that he got asked to play the leading role in the school play, and he literally had a massive meltdown with it.
Oh,
He didn't believe he could do it. He was really distressed. And then he came and did the program. His confidence grew, and then the following year he played the lead role. So whatever triggered him to have that meltdown, we don't need to know. We just know that it can make a difference to those situations and anything really.
that's amazing. That is amazing. The other thing I was going to ask,
Yeah.
what age group can children start the program?
So the minimum age is 6, but we have to be aware that they've got to be able to work in a fairly disciplined way for an hour. So sitting still, following guidance. So depending on the level of maturity at a 6 years of age, that's the youngest. And then the oldest is around 12. So we're talking around the age of puberty, really. But the optimum age is kind of like 7 to 10. And we find that is about the range for the best results with them.
It's interesting. It's interesting because I used to coach a lot of football, and that age group is also very good for laying the pathways in the brain for movement, and yeah, so that's interesting. It links alongside that as well with consciousness. It's such an interesting concept. But do you mind if we talk a little bit about you? Because when I was researching you guys, you've got quite a lot of other stuff that you do. Do you mind sharing a little bit more about what you do yourself as well? Because I feel what that does is it gives what you've discovered, it gives it more, not clarity, but more, I don't know, I can't find the right word in my head. It'll come to me. But it kind of, people get where you're coming from and understand why you're doing this, your motivation kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, I kind of woke up spiritually probably about 18 years ago. I had chronic fatigue and I was in a pretty dark place with it. Anyway, so I came out the other side. I don't have chronic fatigue anymore. And I followed a very swift, very intense spiritual journey, which, we know it always continues. It never stops, but it just has, fits and starts. So I started off learning how to do healing. And then I discovered that I had this psychic ability that I wanted to develop. And it opened up to so much that I didn't know, but I did. And it was like was rediscovering all of these things that were available to me. So in that period of time, I work as a healer. I'm a spiritual teacher. I'm a psychic medium. I do platform work, one-to-one readings, etc. And one of my favourites is trance mediumship as well. So I work as a trance medium, and I have I'm very fortunate. My husband's the most amazing, accommodating person. So I've got one room in the house here that's dedicated to trance. It's got a cabinet, it's completely blacked out and everything. So I do that. I created a brand new healing modality, literally working on toning the vagus nerve in the body. I've created courses, the ego work. Honestly, Paul, there's so much that as I talk about it, I get so excited, and it's like a kid in a candy store.
Yeah,
it's like, what's next?
absolutely. But that's interesting, and we have interviewed a lot of mediums, and it's interesting that your journey not just begun, but was more heightened after your own health experience. There's a kind of a trauma within that.
Yeah.
And that seems to be a common theme with a lot of people. But what I'm really interested in, something you just said, an ego program. And then the problem is people, when they grow and they become more aware, there's this ego trap that we can fall into. We can start to think that we're better than what we really are. And there'll be energies around us that would like us to think like that. How do we get through that?
Well, when I downloaded this program, it was probably about 2 years ago now. It's what I keep being told by consciousness is that if we were all graduates from the University of Life, we'd all have a PhD in complexity. Because the ego's role is to make things complicated, to create doubt and worry and anxiety and all of those things. But actually, we're supposed to have a PhD in simplicity. And it's about looking at yourself and knowing that anything that goes through your mind that is conflicting, I think that's the right word, where you're creating that worry, that doubt, that anxiety, or you're going in the opposite extreme of look at me, I'm the best thing since sliced bread, and things like this. So the program that I created was to retrain the ego to work with your spirit rather than against it.
I love it.
And when they work hand in hand, you've got this amazing coherence where instead of following a path that's full of consequences, you're following a path where the spirit leads you to an outcome. And I always say to someone, if you're having that conversation in your head and you're asking for guidance, the guidance will be explicit. It will be yes, no, or you make your mind up. But when you receive that guidance back and your ego is jumping in, for want of a better term, it will come back with a question, what if? Yeah. It's going to create that doubt, that worry. However, we cannot live without our ego because it's our drive, it's our fight or flight. It's integral to the autonomic nervous system if we look at it from a medical perspective. So we can't live without it, but we can retrain it to work with us rather than against us. And it is so simple. It comes down to working through a process to find one word that you use as a breath word in order to retrain the ego. And we know that 21 repetitions of something makes a habit.
Wow.
So 21 repetitions.
I'm just making notes. Sorry, carry on.
Yeah. So if we worked intensely on retraining our ego for 21 days, it's going to be like, I'm 58, so 58 years of my ego growing and building, or 21 days of retraining it. And something else I discovered that might be interesting to everybody is most people would have heard of the Akashic records.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, what most people don't know is their ego has an Akashic record as well.
So, okay.
And that Akashic record.
Sorry, Nicola. Can I ask you a question on that? Because I have around the Akashic records. Now, is the Akashic records a part of us anyway? And the Akashic records that was, I think it was Edgar Casey that first started to do Akashic record readings back at the turn of the last century. But are we not the Akashic itself? And the Akashic
we are, because
library,
we're separate.
Yeah, because I'm kind of wondering if it's a human concept to create the library, but it's a part of us.
Yeah, because everything is a part of us. We cannot be separate. You and I aren't separate.
Yeah.
There's distance between us. You're in Suffolk, I'm in Essex, but that's a geographical distance. But right now, we can't be separate because we're part of consciousness.
Yeah.
So whether it be our ego, our inner child, our higher self, our spirit, our Akashic record, it's all integral to who we are on just slightly different levels of consciousness. That's all.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's interesting. The 21 days of repetition, how to retrain the ego. I love that. Can we do that with us?
Yeah.
Like even a contemplation on a single word?
Well, what you have to do is go through a process of understanding what your ego traits are. And then once we understand those traits, we look at if I wasn't anxious, how would I feel?
Yeah.
And then we find a word that compounds the positive, and then we work through a process. Paul, what would your ideal world be? You know, if you had a stick of rock and it had one word going through it to describe your world, what would it be?
What?
You know, and a lot of people say peace or joy or abundance, and so we work through the process of saying, okay, we've got all these positives and all these negatives. What bridges the gap between the two? And it comes down to one single word.
Wow.
And then we use that as a breath word. And I mean, the process is a bit tricky because you're trying to work through your ego traits and your ego is trying to prevent you from recognizing them until you get to that point where the ego almost takes a big sigh and says, okay, you've got this now.
Yeah. That is brilliant. We don't do enough of this stuff, mediums. And I think not just from a negative perspective, but we also need to look after ourselves. And I think that's really important.
Yeah.
Our mental health is really important. We tend to give a lot, and we don't always receive. You know, so there is a thing about
Exactly.
And mediums tend to be an unhealthy bunch as well. There is something about craving sugar, I was told, when you work. Now, I'm kind of talking about that tentatively because it is something that I do. I do tend to eat a lot of chocolate, which is really bad, I know. But it's trying to get that balance of physical and emotional and spiritual, that harmony to work with spirit. It's really quite not always an easy thing, but the mental side, the ego side of it is something that we tend to not work on itself. And I love the fact, can we access your courses online?
Yes. So I tend to advertise them on Facebook more than anywhere, or my Facebook and Instagram are linked. There's lots and lots of information about it on my main website, which is nicolafarmer.com.
Yeah.
But I can either do it in groups or I can do it one-to-one. So it's amazing. And then on top of working on retraining the ego, then the final part of that particular work is re-establishing and understanding that the connection with the inner child is different as well. Because what we're doing as human beings is we are working towards wholeness. You know, whether we call it stepping from the third to the fourth to the fifth dimension, whether we call it ascension, whether we call it, you know, Christ consciousness, or whatever names people want to use, the ultimate reason that we're here in this lifetime is to create wholeness.
Yeah.
And I'm constantly told that, you know, your body is your sacred temple for your spirit and your soul to have this earthly experience. And then when we work towards that wholeness, the ego is the biggest stumbling block, but actually the misconception of the inner child is the absolute missing link to wholeness. And so what I teach is that the inner child has never been traumatized, doesn't hold any wounds, because the inner child is pure and perfect in every single way, from the moment you took your first breath to the moment you take your last breath. But where people have been working on with their inner child for millennia, what they've been trying to heal is their childhood. And the traumas from your childhood are actually held by your ego. So people have been trying to heal the ego, but actually the ego can't be healed. So it's been like this sort of self-perpetuating cycle of trying to heal something that actually is part of who you are. So I developed this way to reintroduce the inner child in a different perspective, re-establish that connection so that wholeness can go forward in life.
That's a big statement, because so many people come from a different direction that the inner child is wounded. And so it's a slight misconception. It would make a lot of sense that the inner child is pure of heart and cannot be damaged. Why do people get caught up in that whole dynamic with the inner child being wounded? Is it that more about the ego creating that? I'm not trying to be put anybody down. I'm not trying to say that. I'm just looking at it as from a different perspective.
Yeah. Well, I'm always asking my spirit team why. Tell me why. Explain to it. Is there a formula? And I constantly question spirit, because that's how I work with them, and they love it. They love the questions. And I said to Anna, who's one of my main spirit team, I said to her, Anna, if we're to re-look at the inner child, tell me why there's all these books and writings and classes and cards and all sorts of things about the wounded inner child. And she said, until such times that the world was ready to understand it from a different perspective, there had to be something to grab the attention of people so that they could be working with something, so that there is some form of connection with the inner child. But now we're ready to turn it on its head and say, okay, this is what you've been doing and this is how we can rectify it now. Because I didn't want to go out there and tell everybody about this work and then it looked like I was saying that everybody else was wrong, and I didn't want that.
Yeah.
So that's why I asked her the questions. So everything that people have been doing until this point is good, is perfect. But now we need to take it a whole step further and say, okay, now let's see it from a different perspective. And that's what I was given to do.
I was aware of the wholeness and understanding wholeness from my own guides. And it's just, we are on such it is an interesting time to be alive right now. There's so much happening around us. It is truly amazing. I'm told that so many souls are coming to the earth for this and to watch us as well. But Nicola, a question, and I know we've gone a bit left of center, because I really wanted to promote the Academy, the brilliant work that you do there. And literally these children are going to be the stars of the future, whether they're, going underground and they're not in society, but they're doing such great work. I do believe you've hit on something, that you've created something that is truly wonderful, and I really wish you the best with that. But what is the next for you and the Academy too?
Okay, well, my dream is to be able to bring this program into mainstream education. That would be my ultimate dream. I know that there's a lot more to be done with training teachers around the world, but I was also told that in 2020 there'd be a whole new race of children being born. And I was very privileged to be taken on a meditative journey into what I can only describe as like golden pods, and they were suspended above sacred sites all around the world. And when I was taken into these pods, I was told that these were incubating souls, and they're going to start being born from 2020 onwards, and these would be bringing a whole new level of consciousness to the earth. And so that's from 2020, that's when the Academy started to grow even more, and more people around the world were becoming aware of it. But what I've been told, Paul, is that these children are new souls. They've got no karma, they've got no previous lives, and they're bringing a level of consciousness which is more expanded than Christ consciousness. So what I see happening here with the Academy is that the volume of teachers that are being trained around the world are going to be there to support these new souls in feeling more present on the earth and being able to take it forward. Because I was also told, and I'm sure you know what I'm talking about when I talk about star seeds.
Yeah.
Well, for most of us star seeds, this is our last lifetime on the earth. We don't have to come back anymore. And what I'm told is that these new children, they're bringing something called Anu consciousness, and they will start to take over from what our star seeds have been doing for 13,000 years.
Wow.
So there's the giant picture that's being presented here, as in the starseeds will return to their origins. They won't be needed to help raise the frequency of Earth anymore, because these new children will take over, because they're already bringing a higher frequency than us starseeds.
Wow.
So for me, the growth of the Academy is paramount, so that we've got enough adults around the world supporting these new souls into bringing the new Earth into fruition.
Well, all I can say is, from a layman who doesn't understand the technique you're using and how these wonderful children are coming through the Academy, you are truly blessed, and you're certainly helping raising consciousness and the vibration of the planet. And it's been an absolute privilege to interview you today, Nicola, and we'd love to get you back on again, not just talking about the Academy, but your own personal journey. You've got so much to offer people. We really do appreciate your time today, and thank you so much.
You're most welcome, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to share with more people. So thank you, Paul, and for what you're doing too.
We will also put the link in, guys, Nicola's website, the link to the Academy, also links to the YouTube channel. Guys, you will not believe it. There's even children throwing balls and catching balls as well, blindfolded. It's amazing. You know, when I saw the guys reading, it's like, oh, this is amazing. Then I thought, okay, maybe too much now, because they were catching as well. It was just like my head couldn't get around it. So, but thank you, Nicola. And guys, check it out. And we'll be back again with you very soon with another great podcast. Take care, everybody.